Is this? Oh,
Hello. Hello.
Are any assembly members on the phone line? For folks in the room, we're probably going to get started here in a minute. Mr. Bockenstead, are you with us?
I am, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this work session to order. It's work session number 4 on American Rescue Plan Act funding and town hall. If we can go ahead and start with a roll call, please.
Ms. Allard? Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Ms. LaFrance?
Here.
Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Mr. Rivera?
Present.
Mr. Weddleton? Mr. Constant?
Here.
Ms. Kennedy? Mr. Perez-Verdia?
Here.
And Ms. Zalata?
Here.
Thank you. If you want to get in the queue, please put yourself in the system. Otherwise, text me if you can't access the system, and I will keep track of a queue. Okay, so just before we move on to a presentation, just a little bit of history. So as the public and assembly members are aware, we did have, prior to this, 3 other work sessions and 2 town halls where the assembly got a chance to learn a little bit about the initial guidance that came out and hear from a variety of different groups and experts about some of their opinions and thoughts about how we should use the this next round of federal COVID-19 relief funding heading our way. And in the middle of all of that, we also got a variety of different proposals from different groups. We, our last work session in Town Hall was held in early April, and then we put a pause to learn a little bit more about what the state might be doing and how the federal programs might be rolling out. Now that we know a little bit more about all of those things, the administration has put forward this resolution, which we will be having a work session on in the town hall today. And then we have a special meeting, 2 special meetings scheduled tomorrow. This is the topic of that second special meeting where we will have a public hearing on the resolution and possibly vote on the resolution. Plan for today, so we're going to have a little bit, perhaps about an hour, maybe a little bit more than an hour to do a work session on the resolution. The administration will go through some of the federal guidance, the new guidance that came out, and anything in addition that they want to present on the resolution. Then members will get to ask any questions they have. Then after the work session, we'll have about a 20 to 25-minute break and then come back for the town hall portion of our evening. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to the administration for the presentation.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Jason Bockenstead, Chief of Staff to the Mayor, and I assume that Desiree has the slides that we prepared on the screen. Is that correct?
Yes, there is a slideshow on our screens.
Okay. This will be relatively brief because I wanted to be able to reserve time mainly to, either have receive any comments or answer questions that folks have come up with as they have spent time with what we put together. But wanted to do a quick overview of where we are and why we're sitting here with this resolution, which is, if we're on the second slide, it's because of Congress passed earlier this year the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. It's a nearly $1.9 trillion federal relief package that in many ways is much more targeted than the CARES Act was last year. And just to throw out a couple of numbers, and we'll get a little bit more specific in some later slides as it pertains to Alaska. But just generally, it is about $360 billion to state and local fiscal recovery funds that are split between states, local governments, tribal governments, and so forth. About $650 billion is for direct financial assistance. Another $57 billion is for assistance to individuals and families through a variety of tax credits that were included in there. There, again, we won't, we'll talk a little bit about this, but we won't have direct control over this, but there's over $200 billion for education and child care in this, as well as almost $100 billion to help on the public health side, either in administering the vaccines, providing for additional PPE, or other things that ultimately lower the transmission and get us back to a more normal kind of setting. Desiree, if you could go to the next slide, slide 3. And this is, I think, the key, which is, at least for Anchorage. So out of the local fiscal recovery fund, there was $130 billion that was allocated for both cities and counties. About $65 billion, $100 million was set aside for cities, and $65 billion, $100 million was set aside for counties. Anchorage is receiving allocation from both the city and county allocation. Within I believe it's within the city allocation, Anchorage is receiving $47,376,742, and within the county allocation, they're receiving $55,940,624. Whereas you can see a total of $103,317,366. Now, as you can see, local funds are going to be divided between 2 different tranches. The first one we're expecting to receive any day now, which has been announced, and that is in the amount of $51,658,683. And the second tranche of the exact same amount will likely arrive 1 year from the date in which we receive the first amount. So I would anticipate somewhere around May 17th, May 18th, somewhere right around there, this assembly will be back at and having this exact same conversation about what to do and how to allocate an additional $51 million. Desiree, if you could go to the next slide, please. We'll obviously get into more detail on this, but just kind of a very broad overview of the way or the eligible uses of these funds. We're kind of broken into 4 general categories. You have to be able to respond to the public health emergency or its negative economic impacts. And that includes, and we'll obviously go into more detail, assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofits, or helping those industries that were most impacted, such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. We also have the ability for those workers that were performing essential work to provide premium pay on top of what they are making. Within the guidance, I'll just tell you that that is no more than an additional $13 per hour for those that are performing essential work. The third area is, again, we'll talk about this in more detail, but for the provision of government services based on the reduction of revenue that your local government experienced as a result of COVID-19. And again, within the guidance, within the interim rule, there was a formula that they are essentially having every local government perform so that they can all be relatively the same in terms of calculating the amount of lost revenue. And again, we'll get into more detail about that. And then the final one is that it allows for investments in water, sewer, broadband infrastructure. And then the final one that is related to the local fiscal recovery funds in terms of what is not eligible is we are not allowed to put any of these funds into any pension fund. So there's one additional, I'll just mention this here on this slide, there's one additional prohibition on the state's use of funds, and that is they are not allowed to use it to backfill any tax cuts that state government made within the last year. Again, that doesn't apply to us. That is a state, but I wanted to just put that out on the record just because in case folks have questions about that. Desiree, if you could go to the next slide. And this slide, I really just wanted to highlight the amount that we're dealing with versus the amount that is actually going to be flowing through the Anchorage economy. And a couple of these are the dollar amounts for nationwide, but certainly we would expect a large chunk of that to flow into Anchorage. And as you can see under the business funding, there is over $20 billion that was again appropriated for PPP or targeted EIDL advances. I think as many of you are well aware of, there's almost $30 billion for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. And again, the one that I didn't include in here, but I'll just mention is, again, there was almost $30 billion for child care assistance in here. And then there's $10 billion for State Small Business Credit Initiative, a program that was started back in 2009, and that was actually created that helped us create the 49th State Angel Fund, and we're in conversations both with the state and the Treasury Department to figure out how we, through the 49th State Angel Fund, would be able to access some of those funds to, again, help startups and other businesses with some funding. The state and local government funding, as you can see, $1.25 billion in state relief is going to the state of Alaska. They're obviously in the process in the legislature and figuring out both the operating and capital budget, and it appears that while they won't necessarily deal with some of this relief funding now, it looks like there will be a special session sometime in August where they will be able to determine how they're going to distribute these funds. And then there's $250 million in total relief that is going to all local Anchorage communities. And roughly, as I said earlier, $103 million is going to directly to Anchorage. So again, just really wanted to point out that the $103 million, while a lot of money, is really a drop in the bucket compared to all of the other programs that were included in the American Rescue Plan, and ultimately, either through the state or directly from Treasury or the Small Business Administration, will flow into Anchorage. And just going on for a couple of other things, as you can see, I believe there's about $370 million in education funding that's going to be coming to the state of Alaska through the funds. And again, the legislature will figure out how to distribute those funds to all of the various school districts, and then ultimately how those funds are spent will be up to the school board and the administration on the school district side. Then finally, just a couple of the individual assistance programs that I wanted to mention. There's an additional $152 million in emergency rental assistance that overall the state will receive. We have been notified that Anchorage will receive $26 million of that. And we actually this week, or excuse me, today's Monday, late last week, received the first 40%. So we just received an additional a little over $10 million, and we will work to bring an additional resolution in front of you to appropriate those funds, and we'll work with AHFC and our other partners to figure out how we will ultimately distribute those funds. But this is on top of the roughly $200 million that the state has received. Obviously, $36 or so million came directly to the municipality in that. Again, there's $50 million in mortgage assistance that's going to the state. That will not flow down directly to Anchorage or the municipality, but certainly I believe AHFC will be in charge of distributing those funds, and hopefully that will be starting up here in the near future. And then the final two are, there were, as part of this, the cash direct stimulus payments of $1,400, and roughly 430,000 adults and 193,000 children in Alaska. So roughly 85% of our population received these $1,400 payments. So for an average family of four, that was about $5,600 that they received when the American Rescue Act plan passed. And then finally is the child tax credit that will be available for up to $1,600 per child to roughly 167,000 families in the state. And I will mention that just this last week, the IRS announced that they will begin processing these payments for families on July 15th. So again, as part of the resolution, I'll just mention this one, we do have some funds to hire an additional person on the I-team that will be responsible for notifying families that would qualify for this tax payment to, one, either file their taxes, or two, provide some information so they can begin receiving this payment as early as July 15th of this year, which will go a long ways, obviously, to providing some additional relief. And then finally, Desiree, if you could go to the last slide that I have. This is certainly just a very small look into the Treasury guidance. What they did was they released a 150-page interim rule that goes through and provides a lot of guidance on what programs are eligible or not eligible within each of these. But again, as you can see, within the four broad categories, it's meant to support the urgent COVID-19 response effort and to continue to decrease the spread of the virus. It's meant to replace the lost public sector revenue and strengthen support for the vital public services that local communities provide, and also to help retain jobs. And then finally, the last two are, it supports the immediate economic stabilization for households and businesses, either through direct cash payments, like a voucher that we have in the resolution, or through the variety of grants that we are continuing and will be able to eliminate the entire wait list of folks that weren't able to receive a grant through the CARES Act funding. And then it also, there's some language in there that is meant to help address some systemic public health and economic challenges within certain qualified census tracts. And we do have a couple of those. So with that, I will certainly stop and ask if there are any questions. I know Mr. Schuette's on the line, and he will probably be available to help respond to questions, but we really wanted to leave time to have members ask questions either about the resolution or anything that caught their eye about the guidance as they've seen it over the last several days.
Great, thank you. Ms. Allard?
Thank you. I guess, Mr. Bockenstead, thank you. So the questions that we're going to go over, maybe this is for the chair, in regards to where the funds are going to go, we're going to discuss those after this, or is this the time where he wants us to ask those questions?
Right now, I would suggest that if there's any questions on the presentation, and then after we're done with the presentation, we can go into specific line items here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Mr. Weddleton?
Thanks. I guess maybe I'm jumping the gun then, but Jason, I emailed just a little bit ago a number of questions. Is that something you want to go through now? Or I didn't count the questions, but there's probably a dozen or so. I guess when I say now, I mean at the work session.
I will defer to the chair on how you guys want to handle that.
I don't know what the questions are, so it's hard for me to give guidance.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like on individual.
Yeah, so
sections here.
I guess same guidance I gave to Ms.
Okay.
Allard. If we have questions about individual sections, we can do those after we're done with the presentation. So Ms. Zalatel, is it on the presentation? No? Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry. It's a general question, I guess.
General question. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bockstead, for the presentation. I guess I would like to know a little bit more in a general sense in terms of, if this funding as proposed or whatever iteration is approved. I noticed some of these are scaling programs, but some of these are brand new programs. I'm a little bit concerned or just want to talk through the implementation side of this. I think the idea is to get the funds out quickly, but to the extent that you could provide more information about implementation, you or Mr. Schutte, that would be really helpful just to kind of continue to frame the conversation before we go through the line items.
Yes, through the chair, Assemblymember Zalatel, I will maybe start, and then I'll let Mr. Schutte provide his viewpoint on this. I think one of the things that we certainly tried to do, based on both the priorities that the Assembly has laid out, but certainly what we heard from the community in the variety of town halls and work sessions that you guys have held over the last 6 weeks or so since we knew this funding was coming, was to do a couple of different things. One, really try to focus on some of the programs that already had partners set up so that, one, many of these dollars would be able to be pushed out almost immediately and would be able to be processed and checks would be able to be written. So for, I'd say probably 15 million of that rings true. And while there are some newer programs in here, I do think that many of them I don't envision taking a long time to get off the ground. I think we've learned a lot over the last year in terms of how to work with a variety of partners. And while there are some programs, as you mentioned, that are new, I think within them we've already identified who the funds would ultimately go to, and that they would be able to spin off and get those funds out relatively quickly as well. So with that, I'll ask Mr. Schutte if he has anything to add to that, but we have tried and we are well aware that the desire is to get these funds into the community as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Through the chair, Chris Schutte, Director of Economic and Community Development. Mr. Bockstead is absolutely right. Given the two high-level differences that he just highlighted between this and CARES Act, namely a significant portion of these funds are proposed to go to existing programs or entities, and the fact that the majority of the new programs being requested for funding are named recipients. I do anticipate that the execution portion, at least as far as contracting, grants administration, disbursement, things like that, will go relatively quickly, if not impressively quickly. Thank you.
May I ask a follow-up on that same? Thank you. Previously with the CARES Act funding, we did I believe an allocation or an appropriation for the administration of the funds. Are we equipped to move quickly and administer the funds with kind of as we are currently staffed and through the departments as currently configured?
Through the chair, yes, Assemblymember Zalatel, we believe that we have the appropriate staff and resources available to concentrate on this effort and get things processed quickly.
Great. Thank you both.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton, is it a general question?
Well, it ties in with implementation, if we're on that topic. Can I roll with that?
Sure.
Okay. So, on a number of these, the different groups have very similar goals, and one is on work readiness, and we've got 9-Star, Shiloh Community Housing, the UAA Fast Track Career certificate, Alaska Works Partnership, and the Section 19, I think it's AEDC for connecting unemployed with jobs. So, we're really fortunate in Anchorage to have a lot of nonprofits doing amazing work, but they're not always coordinated and sometimes overlap, and it's not a particularly efficient system. And I just wonder if, because now that we have, this money, we want to use it efficiently and say, okay, we might even stick to the allocations we have, but say, okay, you're all doing basically the same thing, connecting people with jobs or training them and helping them and so on. Tell us how you have a coordinated plan, and when we see that with no redundancies and everybody's together on the team, then we will release these funds. And it's an opportunity to get diverse nonprofits to coordinate and I think use the money more efficiently. Similarly, on the education on what the programs are, helping people take advantage of federal programs that maybe through us, the state or federal level. And we've got, I just wrote down the sections, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 32 are somewhat similar, and maybe do a similar thing there. Say, okay, all of you get together, show us your coordinated plan. Can that happen?
Through the chair, Chris Schutte, Director, Assemblymember Weddleton, I think the short answer to your question is that is already happening and is largely the proposals that you have seen are largely the byproduct of that effort. So particularly the technical assistance section that you enumerated, numbers 11 through 15, each of those entities have been very active members of either the the ERTF or the RVSA, the Roadmap to a Vital and Safe Anchorage. And it is through those collaborative efforts that you're seeing very diverse nonprofits from across the entire municipality regularly participating in the conversations and actions on economic recovery and workforce development. So each of the technical assistance proposals that we receive, while they come from different nonprofits and generally are about the same thing, they are all tailored to be very specific to either a constituency or area of the economy, and will be working in concert with each other. These entities will continue their involvement in the RVSA as well as the other forums in which they collaborate. And I believe Mr. Bockenstedt wanted to add to that.
I think through the chair, Assemblymember Weddleton, I think the only thing that I would add to that is that some of these organizations also help actually very specific sets of the population. And while I think all of them will coordinate with each other, I do think that some of the funds are helping portions of the community that, for lack of funding, lack of support in other areas, probably haven't had the necessary funding to help the specific subsets or specific population that they, within their individual mission, are designed to help. But again, I'll co-sign everything that Mr. Schutte said. I think there is a lot of collaboration. There is a lot of discussion among all of these groups that is happening really for the first time, and we will continue to push that because we do think that's entirely appropriate and important, especially as this is one-time money. So setting up processes and programs that can be sustainable over the long term for these organizations is certainly going to be very important, and communication and collaboration, I think, is going to be a key aspect of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I'll keep going down in the queue, just assuming that these are general questions, but I do have Ms. Allard and Mr. Weddleton in the queue for when we get to specific questions on some specific line items. So first I'll start with Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I have a couple of general questions, mostly regarding eligibility, and thank you, Mr. Bockenstedt and Mr. Schutte, for the information today. I appreciate it very much. It seems like the Treasury guidance is a bit more streamlined this time around, but I do have a question. I'm assuming that those 4 bullet points on the slide that you have up now are largely, that's what determines eligibility, and I'm thinking just as an example of when, we had talked offline about the Girdwood Little Bears and how it didn't fit under the eligibility, and I understand we can talk about that more later, but I just wanted to get a clearer idea than what, determines that eligibility. And then any of the programs and organizations listed here, and this would be my second question, if it turns out that they are eligible for assistance through federal or state funds, would we adjust the amounts, or does that factor into it here? And you may have covered that, and apologies for the repeat, but thanks.
This is Chris Schutte. I'll start through the chair, Assemblymember LaFrance. So when asking questions on the proposals that came from the public through the Assembly for ARPA funding, there is not only the 100-plus pages of the interim rule to compare it to, there's sort of a high-level framework that guides the allowable expenditures, and it essentially boils down to 4 items. Can the proposal identify what the harmful effect of COVID-19 has been that the project or service will address? Does the proposal sort of assess what that causal or compounding connection is between the activity and COVID-19? Does it address what maybe there's been a disproportionate impact on a particular distressed sector or population, and does the proposal address that? Mr. Bockenstedt highlighted tourism, for example. And then lastly, how can you demonstrate that successful outcome of the project or service underscores the objectives that I just outlined? And so I think looking at each of these, we were tasked with quickly going through them because the interim rule came out relatively recently, in reviewing them in order to determine whether or not the interim rule spoke to them. The interim rule, or this particular round of funding at least, is a little more narrowly construed in many ways than CARES Act was, but also is a lot more flexible in other ways. It did not have an exclusive list of allowable expenditures, for example, so there was more leeway granted. Now, that being said, there still were many of the proposals that came in that just could not be determined to be qualified. And by way of background, this exercise that I just described was something that was conducted with MOA Legal and Finance and others to bring as many perspectives to the table as possible. And I'll yield the rest of my time to Mr. Bockenstedt. Thank you.
I don't think I have anything to add to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, if I could go back to the second question about if any of the programs end up being eligible for relief funding, like through the state or the federal government, was that factored into the decisions? Or, do we expect that we may have to come back and adjust the amounts? I know we don't want to pull back on any funding, but that was a big part of some of the earlier conversations we had, was how to navigate the different relief streams. And so if you all would comment just on that piece of it. Thanks.
Yeah, through the chair. My apologies, I did forget the second part of your question. So the short answer is yes. We did evaluate projects not only through the lens of is it a local fiscal recovery eligible project, but we also looked at whether or not they fit into some of the other funding buckets that Mr. Bockenstedt highlighted earlier. And so there were projects that were in here that could not be made to fit within the fiscal recovery criteria, but clearly would be eligible for other funding opportunities that are out there. So you highlighted one of them, for example, the Coronavirus Capital Projects Fund, which is an American Rescue Plan Act bucket of money that lands at the state. It's $112 million, I believe. So that was factored into the decision-making. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
Thanks. Yeah, just on Mr. Welton, your point about coordination, I think that to require that level of coordination in advance of funding creates a difficult position for most of these organizations, but to require it after funding is probably very wise. And so I think that one of the restrictions we ought to consider putting on any of these major categories is to require a level of coordination that we establish is a proper level. And that way they actually have the funding to do that work and they're doing it at our request.
Thank you. Mr. Whittleton?
Thanks, Chris, for that. So, looking at your 4 points up here, it's interesting. So, number one is urgent response. Second one, replace, lost revenues, government revenues. And then another one, support immediate economic stability. Sounds pretty quick. And then the next, systemic public health and economic challenges. And my expectation, I don't know if I read something into it or not, or I kind of flipped through the 100-plus page document. But the fact that some of this is now and some 12 months later kind of suggests it's not really all about immediate action, because some doesn't come for a year, and a lot of these problems will be long ago history by the time we get that second batch. So, my sense is that we should have is there not a goal in there that long-term resiliency can be part of this?
Through the chair, Assembly Member Weddleton, I think you are honing in, as usual, on a very important aspect that we had a very long discussion about, which is to say that the economy and what we are facing right now is going to look very different potentially 12 months from now. And I think if I was a betting man, I would say that over the next 12 months, there will likely be additional guidance that comes out based on the unemployment rate, based on the numbers that they're seeing, and by they, I mean the federal government through the Treasury Department, the numbers that they're seeing in terms of lost jobs at, say, the local government level. And I think that is going to be the challenge and the opportunity that the Assembly has a year from now to potentially invest the second round of funds into those kind of areas that you were talking about that build more resiliency, either within the public health world or just generally into the local economy. So we tried to balance that a little bit here, but I think we definitely erred on the side of let's help the local economy as much as we can right now, and either in the form of grants or funding to help individuals find more permanent housing, for example. But I do think that over the next year, that conversation will probably very much tilt the other way, which is where can we invest these funds to create some long-standing resiliency or long-standing return on the investment for the entire community.
Thank you.
If I may add to that, through the chair, Assemblymember Weddleton, the one sort of detail I'll add to what Mr. Bockenstedt highlighted is that there are significant portions, although not the largest dollar value allocations, but significant line item projects contained in the funding proposal that move our city and move our economy in that direction, in looking at ways to make not only the economy more resilient and adapt to a new economy, but also our workforce, particularly as we look ahead to the infrastructure money that will be flowing to Alaska and the job and workforce needs that will come with it. So I just wanted to make sure that we highlighted that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I move on to the next person in the queue, I just want to reiterate for folks members of the public who have just joined us. So we are right now in the work session part of our evening, which should end at around 5:30 or 5:40. After that, we'll take a short break and then come back for the town hall portion of our evening, which should start at approximately 6 p.m. So we are moving right along. Next, Ms. Zalotel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Along the lines of what Mr. Weddleton was asking, could you talk a little bit about the expected time, spending time for these funds? So as these appropriations grow out, what is our expectation that these funds will be spent within the next year, the next 2 years, so that we can make sure we have that frame on the conversation as well? Thank you.
Through the chair, Assemblymember Zalotel, the list of proposals in front of you is a mixture of immediate, mid, and longer term. So without going through it item by item, I will share that there are some programs in the workforce and business development category that are designed to be 12 to 16 month long programs. There are others that are short-term, immediate programs as well. So it's a variety. It depended on the timeline of the project proposed by the applicants, but by and large, they cover a wide variety of activities with different sort of complete by dates between, a few months and a year plus. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, seeing no more general questions, we'll go ahead and move on to line item specific questions, starting with Ms. Allard.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is probably going to be directed to the administration then. So a couple of my concerns, and maybe it's lumped into another area. I went through everything and I didn't see it. But it looks like some of the nonprofits are still same nonprofits. And I do remember bringing up for the VFW, the Lions and Elks and other nonprofit clubs. And I was wondering, did you factor those in somewhere else? Because I see quite a few that weren't included, and I may just be overlooking it. Can you address that for me, Mr. Balkenstedt?
I might actually let Mr. Schutte address that one.
Thank you. Could you rephrase the question? I'm not entirely sure I understood what was being asked. Are there other nonprofits included?
No, I'll be more specific. So I do see that the MAC Center is being addressed. I see the Chamber of Commerce and Eagle River, both of those are being addressed. I know Ms. Kennedy had brought up a couple with the food pantry and the senior center. The ones I'm seeing that I just overlooked it were for the nonprofits with the VFW and the Lions, and it looked like some of the summer camps with the children were out, and it looked like the Team Alaska was out, and I wasn't sure if it was because they didn't fit into a certain category or that the administration decided those weren't going to be added.
Thank you. So I believe specific to the request on the nonprofit clubs such as VFW, Lions, et cetera, in looking at my notes, it looks like that was not provided, and the rationale was that there were the majority of those clubs had already received or were eligible for hospitality relief funding, and for that reason they were not recommended for additional grant funding of $166,000 each. And I don't recall, and I don't see anything else in here, but that's in my notes. That's what I have written down.
Can I follow up, Chair? Okay, so I do know that some of them did receive PPP, about $22,000, but they've suffered greatly. They weren't able to fundraise. So then my other question is about the summer camps that we had discussed, and then it was, the other one was the Team Alaska, where families were actually out quite a bit of money. I will say this, I would be willing to swap some of the stuff from the Chamber of Commerce because they're going full-fledged ahead, received $100,000. They're going to be doing Bear Paw. So I'm wondering if there's a way we can maneuver some money around so that organizations that have received zero can receive something.
Thank you. So go ahead, Mr. Balkenstedt. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to jump in on the next two, which is through the chair, Assemblymember Allard, on the summer camp or the summer school related ones. We did spend some time on that one, and from our perspective, because the school district is also expected to receive upwards of likely over $100 million for the school district, We thought that one was a more appropriate one that would potentially be funded through the funds that they received, since it was very much in our mind, and maybe we were wrong to assume this, but it seemed much more school-related, and we thought it would be more appropriate to come there. On the final one, which was Team Alaska, again, we spent some time on this one, and maybe you would be able to shed more light or more information on this one, but as we were looking at the interim rule, it appeared that this was tied or would be what we considered assistance to households. And while that is certainly allowed, within the interim rule, it provides a long list of eligible uses within there, such as food assistance, rent, utility assistance, home repairs, weatherization, internet access, job training, things like that. However, it also says that that you can presume that the recipient is experienced unemployment or increased food or housing insecurity. And that was essentially the link that we were looking at as we were evaluating all of these different programs. So it was hard for us, based on the information that we had, on were the families that were going to be reimbursed for their loss unemployed? Did they experience housing insecurity or some other negative economic impact that would provide that hook for us to be able to, I think, say this was an eligible use. But based on the information that we had, we just couldn't figure out how we would be able to say that was an eligible use for this program. But again, if you want to provide us more information, we're happy to kind of look at that.
Can I do? Thank you. So my other question then would be, it looks like we have a lot of things going to like UAA and other issues to pertain to the schools. And so I'm wondering where the division is, but I think we could probably follow up on that. So then I would go with, how is because it looks like I have a question on line item, the 140, and I might be off by 10,000, but it looks like $140,000 for the library. And didn't we just do a bond for the library? And then we're doing another grant for the library, and I'm just wondering, where does it stop? Because you did bring up a point that the education, they feel that there's $100 million coming for the ASD. So I'm curious on why the library is getting more money than businesses are actually suffering and going under. The library is not going to go under. And I'm just wondering if we could redirect those funds to some of the other ones that have maybe been cut from this process. Just to give you a thought, and then maybe we can address it later as we go through the discussion. And Chair, I just have one more that I think they could actually answer. Oh, okay, let me flip here. It's 34 November, so 34 in. And it's the Anchorage Community Development Authority. Can you put on record a little bit more of the rationale for the public to understand why that's such an important item for $2 million?
I'll start through the chair, Assemblymember Allard. Anchorage Community Development Authority is a bit of a unicorn out there in that it is not a private business, it is not a nonprofit, and it's not technically a municipal department. It is a public corporation. By virtue of being that unicorn, they were ineligible for any of the relief funding opportunities that have been available to date, meaning they were ineligible for any of the EIDL funds or loans, any of the PPP opportunities, so on and so forth. They have continued to carry on their obligations and responsibilities as it relates to safety and security at public parking lots and garages. They've been forced to lay off numerous employees, but have upheld their obligation to the public parking and public spaces. As a result of all of that, they've been operating at a tremendous loss for the past 16 months, roughly, and they are going to run out of money, basically. They are a part of the municipality, and as such, they are an eligible expense for the fiscal relief funds. This $2 million is designed to help keep them afloat and provide them enough of a sort of a cash flow cushion that they can slowly resume operations, not at a loss any longer, as the economy begins to come back to downtown Anchorage. Thank you.
Chair, can I do a quick follow-up and then I'm done? Okay. This isn't the one where that we were trying to get, because I might be wrong. Is this the one then where we were going to do a loan to this? The Anchorage Community Development Authority, that we were going to put through a loan, but it wasn't going to pass with the Assembly? Is this the same people?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Zaltel, that's the same entity, but no, that is not the same. We're not talking about the same use of funds.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
Thanks. So I actually had a long list that I emailed in. So what was our time schedule for today? I don't want to...
5:30, 5:40 for the work session.
Okay, well, this would take half an hour. So now tomorrow we have our meeting, then we have a town hall after. Is there another work session on these?
Tomorrow, no, we don't have a town hall tomorrow.
Oh, what's after the meeting?
So we have two special meetings tomorrow. First special meeting is to deal with certification of the recount for the 2 school board races, and the second meeting is to deal with this. We have a public hearing tomorrow on this item.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I just want, I had a number of things. I guess I might ask 1 or 2 of these then, and then just ask the administration, when you have a chance, if they could go through, answer the questions, and then just share that with all of the Assembly members before tomorrow. One thing that, I guess a couple things that jump out. One is the Section 10, the property tax grant program. And I wonder if you could have an idea, how many businesses would that cover? And then, I'm assuming that this ties in with AO 2020-117S1 that we passed that I guess had 6 takers from the CARES Act funds, or when we did this in December. And we have on that a cutoff with revenues of $1 million. And, that realistically for most businesses is kind of low. Is that something we could change, that threshold? If this allocation is done, can we go in and change the requirements for distribution at that level of detail?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Weddleton, I'll take first crack at this one and say that, of course, I think any change is certainly available. We were basing this one off of I think conversations that were had at least one of the town halls from some Assembly members about the potential of potentially reopening the process for businesses with, personal property tax to apply, because as you mentioned, when the original ordinance passed that created this grant program, I believe the cutoff date was April 1st of this year, and when that date came and passed, there were only 6 businesses that applied for the $5,000 grant. So we are technically only needing to pay out $30,000 based on the ordinance that you referenced. So I think if the Assembly wanted to reopen that, and I would assume, I'll defer to Kate or Mr. Gates on would the Assembly need to amend the ordinance that created this program. But based on the fact that it was going to provide $5,000 grants, this $500,000 would allow up to 100 businesses to apply and receive that. But once you subtract the 6 that already have, I guess it would be 94 new businesses that technically could apply if the Assembly did want to open that up. But I'll also let Mr. Schutte jump in if he has anything anything to add to that.
Thank you. Nothing to add.
Okay, so, I mean, I'm confused on something here, and I think it's all on me. You know, because I looked at, my recollection was that we did this $5,000 grant, but then I looked, poking around my notes, there was AO 2020-117S1 that was based on, you know, you got 16% of your property tax, personal property tax if you were closed for 30 days, and another 8%, something per week, or I don't forget, some kind of scheme like that. It wasn't a straight 5,000. So clearly that's not the $5,000 per business. Where'd the 5,000 per business come from?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Weddleton, my recollection of the ordinance was that what ultimately passed set a set amount of $5,000 and didn't get into the kind of formula that was kind of crafted in the first one. But I could be mistaken in that. My recollection was, again, that it was a set $5,000. It closed on April 1st, and there were 6 businesses that applied for it and would be eligible to receive $30,000 of this funding.
Okay, I'll investigate more, because my recollection initially was what you said, but then I looked at that ordinance and it's different. But so there's got to be something else going on. So I will move on if I made it one. Okay, so looking at number 9, the meals program. You know, this is a large amount of money, fairly generous. And is this about helping restaurants, or is this about feeding the people that were sheltering at Sullivan Arena and hotels and so on?
So through the chair, Assemblymember Weddleton, the program has 2 benefits, but as you sort of implied or asked in your question to the administration, restaurants are open again, is the program needed? It's a program that has 2 beneficiaries. It's the restaurants that have the ability to bring on additional workforce when they can find them to help prep the meals, but more importantly, it's the families and individuals who are recipients of these meals that ultimately are benefiting from the program. Thank you.
And if I could just jump in with one further comment through the chair, Assemblymember Weddleton. These meals, my understanding, aren't going to, say, the families at the Sullivan Arena or other places. These are for other families that, you know, have contacted United Way, that might be struggling with lower family salary or family income, might be unemployed. Certainly, I believe that some of these meals have also gone to individuals that we would consider in a higher risk category that typically in the past would be able to go out to a restaurant and have a meal, and we are providing them this service as well. So I just wanted to differentiate between the food that is being provided at the Sullivan or some of our non-congregate shelters with this program. They're 2 completely separate programs.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I was clearly confused on that part. So, okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
Thank you. Jason, line 33, the UAA program, I hadn't seen that anywhere before, and that's a pretty substantial program. Can you give us a briefing on what that story is?
Sure. Through the chair, Assemblymember Constant. This is one of those programs that that is scalable. I had thought that somebody had discussed this at one of the town halls or work sessions that we had, but certainly this is a program that UAA offers, and that they had reached out to the administration as well and said, hey, we have this certificate program at the university that typically covers 2 or 3 semesters, and we would be very interested in being able to provide scholarships or grant funds to a number of individuals that have been unemployed or want to focus on retraining based on all of the various programs that they have there. And the request was for $5 million, but again, as I mentioned, this is scalable. So if ultimately we want, or the Assembly wanted to reduce this, all it would do is change the number of individuals that would ultimately be able to go through this certificate program at no cost to them. So. But happy to also provide additional information over the next day or so. I believe we can fish out some information that UAA has sent us on this.
Thank you. I am next in the queue. So a few questions from me, and I'll just go through all of these, and then individuals can answer them. So first is on sections 2 through 10. Just in general, are there any changes to the way that these programs are being run that are significant from the prior programs? Next is line 20 or section 21. Is there a timeline for when that study is going to get to the administration? Line 28. Is this a long-term funding project, rather, that is going to eventually require other types of funding to keep it going? Then I think I had one more. And then last is the balance. So it appears that of the dollars, there are 584,000 that are not appropriated. Does the administration have any thoughts on the balance? And perhaps there are some ideas that weren't funded that, if eligible, could be used that balance dollars. So those were my questions. I'll turn it over, I guess starting with the first one, if the administration wants to respond.
Through the chair, Mr. Chair, I would say that the answer to your first question on the items 2 through 10, no, we do not expect any changes for these. This is essentially us, for the most part, clearing the backlog of all of the applications that we have received to date. So I wouldn't, as well as a continuation on a couple of them, such as the meals program, as well as the additional funds for the tourism and Visit Anchorage. So don't anticipate any additional changes. On your second question in relation to, I believe it was the the Northern Culture Exchange. I don't believe that we have set a date in which this study was supposed to be finished, but certainly if this is an item that's approved, we could certainly include that, include some sort of date in the grant agreement, so both the administration and the Assembly were aware of when this study would be completed, and I think we'd be certainly open to including said date once we were able to maybe talk to them and say, how long do you think this study will take you to complete? We're happy to do that.
The next one might be better for, I don't know if the administration's ready or if Ms. Zalatil or Mr. Constant want to ask the next one, which is on section 28. Is this expected to be long-term, and if so, where do we get the funding for it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is really to concentrate on the efforts around the outflow, particularly for non-congregate shelter. We have the effort in line 30 focused on the Sullivan Arena, and then also while we are working on outflow through both of those efforts, to also ensure that coordinated entry is implemented so that we are diverting as many people as soon as possible from the homeless response system into housing.
Okay, so then I guess the answer would be yes, that it is expected to be long-term?
It could roll out over the course of 12 to 16 months, yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Mr. Constant.
just on that note, it's not intended to be permanent, it could be. And it just depends on the functionality, the transition from mass care into shelter. And so it'll be part of the ongoing conversation about how to restructure our homeless array as we go forward.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. And then I think the last one, going back to the administration, is the 548,000 in balance.
And I believe, through the chair, I believe your question was, does the administration have any ideas on that? And I think the response would be no. We wanted to be able to, based on the entire list that both the community and the assembly provided to us, we really went through and tried to add those that we believe we could identify as an eligible expense based on the rules. And while certainly I think some of these programs would likely love to have additional funding, we wanted to be able to provide that opportunity. Certainly I understand that there will likely be some amendments tomorrow evening as the Assembly hopefully approves this, and we wanted just to have that flexibility built in so that conversation would, I think, flow a little bit easier based on having at least a little bit of wiggle room there. And if I could, just real quickly, go back to the previous one as well and just add on a little bit to what Assembly Members Zalatil and Constant said, which is to say, part of this, I think, is also super important to get this piece right. Because once we have this set up and once we are tracking all of this, again, my understanding is that there is the real potential that being fully stood up with a shelter intake system, one of the many HMIS systems that are out there, once we have that completely set up, there is the opportunity that it will open up additional federal grant funding to potentially come into our community. So again, I just wanted to throw that out there. While yes, this is a cost here, if we can get this right and we can get this system stood up, there is likely some additional funding that would come our way based on us having this system set up.
Got it. Great. Thanks, everyone, for those responses. I also understand Mr. Schutte has a quick response to my question on Section 21. Mr. Schutte?
Sorry, I was on mute. I was doing a wonderful job, too. Through the chair, Chair Rivera, the proposer of this program indicated that the total report time would be 14 to 18 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple quick questions. Going back to number 33, the $5 million to UAA Fast Track Career Certificate, I was just wondering how many individuals that might serve. That's one question. And then a second question on item or section 34 in the I, permit fee relief for community programming partners. What exactly is that one, or what are the permit fees that are in need of relief? Thanks.
Thank you. Through the chair, Assembly Member Zalatil, the fee relief line item, I'm going to go backwards if that's okay. The fee relief line item that you've asked about, in an effort to encourage more entities and families and individuals to do things outdoors, we have waived our Parks and Rec permit fees for the year so that organizers of special events outside or graduations, things of that nature that typically have to pay a permit fee normally. This year they don't have to. And so that is a fiscal recovery line item designed to offset those lost revenues. And my apologies, Assemblymember LaFrance, for missing your name. To the first question on the UAA program, again, as Mr. Bockenstadt indicated, because it is scalable, the number of residents that can be funded for this program depends on the dollar amount. But at the level proposed, they do anticipate that it could impact 300 to 500 individuals. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Allard.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Bockenstead or Mr. Schutte, this is Jamie. I wanted to go back to, in regards to the American Legion, the VFWs, and the Lions. And the reason why is because when I said 166,000, it's actually for 6 posts as an example. That would be the American Legion. And out of those 6, only 1 did receive funds, and I believe it was 22,000. So of the other 6 posts, which one includes an all-women's American Legion, they haven't received any money from either federal, state, or the Muni. So I wanted to know if it's possible. I'll send the numbers to you to reevaluate that those clubs, to include Eagle and Lions and the Elks, VFW, and American Legion, to be clear, they have not received funds. And it's a breakdown of 27,000, which I should have been more detailed about. So I just wanted to make that a little bit more clear. Thank you, Chair.
Through the chair, Assemblymember Allard, thank you for that additional information. I want to be clear that providing funds to nonprofits such as these are certainly an eligible use of these funds. So certainly, I don't want to give that impression, but based on the information we had, that was kind of the determination that we made. So thank you for providing that additional information, and certainly my understanding is there will be an amendment process tomorrow to potentially change some of these allocations.
Thank you. Ms. Zolotel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if it's possible for tomorrow night to put the time frame on the chart so that we can better, at a glance, track. I like the way it's organized in terms of continuation programs, technical assistance, and so on. I think that's great, but if we could also add that time frame, then we can, at a glance, see within each of those kind of the length of time of the programs, because it sounds like you already have it, if that's okay, or if we need to get you more information on any of these programs that we've provided. I would be happy to do that for anything that I've provided, but I think it would be a little bit easier to see how they all coordinate together. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
Actually, I'm going to pass. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm not seeing anyone else in the queue. So that'll go ahead and close the work session. I want to encourage members, if they have any other questions, feel free to email the administration. And then we'll be ready for an amendment process tomorrow. With that, we're going to go ahead and take a 20-minute break. And when we come back, we will be ready for the town hall portion of our evening. Thanks, everyone. All right, so we're going to start here in a minute or so. Thanks everyone for staying with us. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started again. All right, so thanks to the administration for the presentation, and thanks to everyone for their questions. Now we're going to move on to the town hall portion of our evening. So for this portion, just like any regular assembly meeting, you will have 3 minutes to make your comments. And then after that, there might be a little bit of back and forth between assembly members and anyone who would like to speak. And then we'll just keep doing that until everyone who wants to speak has been heard. So with that, would anyone like to speak? Welcome.
Hi, my name is Irene Quidnow, and I have a couple questions. Under item or section 4, it's all small business relief closeout. I had said before that I would really like to see some of the restaurants and businesses that had to shut down before they received any relief to get some kind of help. And my question, I guess, is would that be included in that, or if not, then where is that somewhere in here in this whole thing? Or do they just, because they already closed, they don't get anything? The other thing I have a question about is on section 8, it says cultural pillars. What is that? I might have missed it earlier. I wasn't here from the beginning of the meeting, but I don't know what that is and how that would help us recover from COVID. The meals program in section 9, it's a good program. I'm not sure if we need it till the end of the year. We have, and I make my comment in conjunction with what you've heard before, there is many jobs out there and people can't find people to work. And the longer we help them, the less likely they will be to take a job. I think we should extend it some, but not till the end of the year. And then the other thing that I noticed is there is a lot of retraining people and connecting them with jobs. As good as that is, but there are jobs out there. Today I saw a sign, McDonald's is hiring for $15 an hour. You can't tell me that people can't work if they want to work. So retraining is good, but I don't know if we need it in these proportions because, like I said, there's many jobs out there. If people want to work right now, I don't think they would have major trouble to find it. Now, to help them connect if they need that, that is one thing, but a lot of people just don't want to go back to work to their previous jobs because they get more when they sit at home. Thank you.
Thanks. I do have a comment, actually.
Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So thanks for coming and thanks for those comments. So I'm going to make a couple comments and I'm going to turn to the administration for a response because I don't remember all of the details. So the administration put this forward, and I would imagine that the reason that they didn't include funding for restaurants, like you said, that were closed is because of the federal restaurant revitalization program. That program is going to be huge. And
Okay.
Desiree, I don't know if you could bring up the slide for that where it talks about how much dollars that we are getting in Anchorage and in Alaska, but we are getting many, many millions that's going to go
Okay.
specifically targeted to the restaurant
Okay.
industry. So I
I
think
didn't-
that's likely the reason that wasn't included in here, because someone else is covering that particular issue.
Okay.
And then on the meals program, so, the meals program does a couple of things, and I think like the administration tried to explain, it helps put people back to work, right? So it's connecting funding for businesses, also connecting funding for caterers who maybe didn't have a lot of work in the last year. So delivering the food that the restaurants make to at-risk populations. So the funding's going to a lot of organizations that work with at-risk youth, to foster families, to other at-risk populations. I understand they're going to a lot of seniors. So it's really those sort of three things that I see as the biggest benefits for the meals program. Helping restaurants bring people back to work, helping caterers who maybe haven't had work in a while, and then helping those at-risk populations. And then last, on the cultural pillars, hopefully Mr. Schuette's still with us and can speak to the different cultural pillars included in that funding. Or Mr. Constant probably could too.
I can, thank you. And also I would add before that, you'll notice a whole series of technical assistance categories of funding to help people access funding. And with all of those dollars that are available federally and at the state, we are providing funds for people to help those businesses apply for the federal money so they will have a very strong chance of success. Instead of us spending the money one time, we'll spend it one time and help multiple layers of people apply and succeed in receiving and bringing back to Alaska more federal support and state support. So that's the rationale behind those various technical assistance pools, is to really help the organizations that are struggling to be successful by not making them have to be the applicant, because applying for federal funding can be a real challenge. And so the cultural pillars are 4 organizations. It's the Alaska Zoo, the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center, the Anchorage Museum, and the Alaska Native Heritage Center, all major entities within, or there's a 5th one, I'm being told. I'm sorry, I don't know who the 5th one is. The Alaska Center for Performing Arts. These are all organizations that have a strong basis in tourism that are critical, and if they were to go down, there'd be no way to bring them back. And so those are the organizations supported under that category.
Yeah, and I wasn't criticizing that point. I just didn't know what it meant.
Absolutely,
So-
and I want you to know.
Thank you.
These are, it really became clear in the initial round, especially for the zoo and the conservation center, that if they didn't have enough funds, they would have one thing that they would have to do with all of those animals. And once you do that, it never happens again. And so that's why we intervened.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Dustin Darden. This is a public health emergency, and I'm putting you on notice through the chair. There's not enough money appropriated from the $120 million to protect you from the legal ramifications of your, through the chair, involvement in a federal conspiracy against rights. The fact that the majority, through the chair, of this body, the Municipal Anchorage Assembly, voted last Friday to end a mask mandate in public places, and yet cannot follow its own vote and still enforces an oxygen blocker over individuals' faces, shows just how far away from reality you have become. You voted through the chair to end the mask mandate. LaFrance, Rivera, through the chair, Mr. Weddleton, through the chair, Mrs. Kennedy, through the chair, Forrest Dunbar, through the chair, Christopher Constant, through the chair, Cameron Perez-Verdiaz, and through the chair, Jamie Eller, all voted to end the mask mandate. How can you expect to be responsible for the appropriation of $120 million if you cannot follow through on one simple, clear, concise vote of not wearing a mask in a public building, which this is, on this day? Furthermore, this mask is known, and I have read, and you've read the literature too as well, as a control mechanism to encourage a shot, which is known to cause death, which is known to cause infertility, the dissolving of human organs. UT did a study on coronavirus vaccines 5 years ago. We're talking $120 million on animals, and all the animal trials had dissolved internal organs. So you got cancerous growths growing inside of people through this. You've got metallic mercury going inside of people's body. And you can't even enforce something that you just voted for Friday. And you think you can manage $120 million. Any questions?
I don't see any. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to say a couple things. I was listening to the whole thing before, and there are some things about employment in general that can be, did I do that? I don't think so. Okay. That I could clear up pretty fast, I think, for everybody. Our program at 9 Star could be, and I'm Ruth Shane-Laban from 9 Star Education Employment Services. Sorry. I just wanted to say that our program can be 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. We're hoping, we'd like to eradicate unemployment, but we all kind of know that there's a lot of issues with that. And our clients have a lot of barriers. So there's a whole lot of difference between how we do business and somebody else that's putting people to work. It's a very different, we all do different things, and we all collaborate together. We share resources, we share information, strategies, we meet together real often. And so there's a lot about that that I would happily answer questions afterwards. 9 Star specific program is trying to build resiliency. We've added behavioral health to our program, and also long-term, get a job, get some employment, get some more training, get a better job. And our goal is to get to the point of financial self-sufficiency. None of us are self-sufficient, but we can all support each other in reaching that point by training and so on. There's a lot of barriers that people have. During our COVID pandemic, we were able to help people who were on the brink of homelessness, and that's always our goal, to prevent homelessness entirely. They were on the brink of homelessness, and with the money from this whole process, the federal government giving it to us here, we were able to put a lot of people to work and avoid the homeless situation. But the biggest thing is that, matter of fact, just in the months of November and middle of November to the middle of January, we put 41 out of 97 newly enrolled people. It's ongoing year-round, but we put 41 of them to work. And now our goal is to help them become financially self-sufficient and get to the next step. So we're going to keep them for a while and keep moving, because we want this money to last us. We want our people to be prepared for the next step and the next step and the next step, so that they can contribute back to the community instead. So there's a lot of things, but long-term is our goal, collaboration's our goal, and if you have any questions about that, my 3 seconds is about over.
Thanks. I have a few folks in the queue, starting with Mr. Weddleton.
Thanks. 3 seconds, that would be like, we'd be out of here before midnight all the time. Thanks. So I want to talk about how you coordinate with these, variety of other groups. And I know there's lots of groups doing this work, but in this proposal, there's 9 Star, of course, Shiloh Community Housing, UAA Fast Track Career Certificate, Alaska Works Partnership, that's I think like a union group for their, promote their apprenticeship programs, and then AEDC building a, I guess like an online jobs thing.
Well,
And
I think,
it seems like there's a lot of redundancy. I mean, it's like Department of Labor does that jobs thing. So, there's lots of different pieces. How in this big thing do you find, and we did a tour of the food pantry on O'Malley Road, and they said, oh, we were going to do job placement things here too. People really need to have help finding jobs and doing their resumes. And I go, but Nine Star does that. So there's a lot of people involved with this, and it's, how do you find them and coordinate with them?
well, the food pantry in South is new, and I have not even had a chance to get down there and meet those folks. So we don't have a partnership with them yet. I mean, I think it's very, very new. And, but one of our thoughts is that we have brochures we're taking over to the Muni, and, well, we haven't gotten them to the Muni yet, but over to Lutheran Social Services and places that do the rent assistance, so that anybody that's needing rent assistance will be saying, whoa, I can get a job and I won't need rent assistance. I mean, the goal is to not, there's repeated, Lutheran Social Services told me they come back and they come back. We don't want them to come back. Now, we understand the pandemic has a lot of other daycare issues and health issues and all of that besides, but we've had rent assistance for how many millions of years? We've just done it forever. And we want to take those folks and help them. So Lutheran Social Services is giving them our brochures and telling them, come to see us. And we'd like to be able to work then with them to make sure that they get the assistance that they need, but that they don't stay on that assistance. That's kind of our goal. And that's just one example. Catholic Social Services and Nine Star are talking about how to educate and train people that are coming from poverty, but a lot of their folks are immigrants. And so our English as a second language program helps. So we combine those. They don't do English as a second language, we do. We don't do housing, they do. So we coordinate the different kinds of services. It's too much for one organization to manage all those different pieces, but our community does a good job at sharing and participating. I'm on the Coalition to End Homelessness Council, and we're also on the statewide one through some of our staff members. But with all of that, I'm in contact with all those folks all the time, and we do not overlap. Our populations are a little different, the needs are different. Our particular population has a lot of barriers to staying employed, so the mental health piece has come in, behavioral health piece has come in. We are trying to work all these community resources together, because really, we have to work together to make it work, and we have to have good relationships. And I think, for the most part, our social service agencies in this community do work very well together. And we all need our pots of money to be able to do the piece that we do, and then we share them. And even Shiloh, Nine Star had an AmeriCorps program. They had one of our members. Our youth program coordinates with them because we have the jobs that they don't have, and they have the housing we don't have. And so I think it's all a matter of the pieces being coordinated, and we put it in terms of, jobs isn't the only thing Nine Star does, but we put it in that consideration because we want to say to the people, look, if you get to work, and I did some figures today, which I won't bother you with, but every person that goes to work and doesn't get on public assistance saves $20,000 to $25,000 a year to the public funds, and that doesn't count the administration of those funds, doesn't count the support services to those funds. I mean, it's just an incredible amount of money. So we want to prevent all of that. But there are other people, they're already there, they're homeless, they're already in that situation. So other agencies do that, and then we partner with them. I don't know if that's helpful.
No,
or
it does help, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance?
Oh, there we go.
Hi, thank you so much for being here tonight, and also for the work that your organization does.
Thank you. We have a great, great team. I'm so proud of them. Proud to be part of it.
So I know that you heard, and earlier a member of the public who commented on how, there are a number of jobs available, and we're hearing
Yes.
that a lot lately. And could you say a little bit more, and I really appreciate the explanation as to the kinds of services your organization provides and also how you work with the other organizations, but could you say a little bit about how
I'm
that
happy
piece-
to do that. Matter of fact, when she was talking, I was thinking, I want to answer that. Thank you for asking. We have 15 openings in our own company. We have 15 openings we haven't been able to fill. Job development and case management kinds of jobs. And we know a lot of the reasoning is sometimes it's daycare, sometimes people are on unemployment and they're getting more money than they would get working for our nonprofit. Sometimes it's because there's health issues involved, and so they're afraid to go back. I mean, we have a few people coming into our building, but for the most part, our 3,000 clients don't come in. We have figured out how to serve them away. Not the best way, but that is a way to serve people. But the other thing, I think, is our particular population, most of the populations of most of the social service agencies that do this kind of work and that we partner with, our clients aren't ready to go to work. So we need a few months sometimes to get them ready, to get them through workshops. How do you get a job? We do not just find them a job and put them there. We help them learn how to get their job, and we help them get that job, and we have connections to those employers. But our goal is teach them how to fish. And so that's a big, important piece. And you also have to help them remove barriers. And people who are depressed and people who are just don't know how to keep a job. They were never raised that way. I mean, I remember a few years ago we had a youth program, and the kids got paid for coming to our program 1 day a week for education during the summer, and the other 4 days they would go to a nonprofit or a public entity and learn how to work. And one day I walked past this one teacher who should have had 20 kids in her class, and it was like 9 o'clock in the morning. And I said, "What'd you do, scare them off?" She had one student in there. And she said, no, they decided they didn't want to make at the time it was like $9 an hour. They would skip that $9 an hour and sleep in for a couple hours. They'd skip $18 an hour. And they knew there was public money coming. I mean, so there's sometimes a mentality of not knowing how to go to work because somebody didn't train you. My kids, they went to work every day. I didn't have to get them up out of work. I mean, I had to wake them sometimes, but they got up and they went to work because it had been modeled for them. For some people, it has been modeled. And, the ACEs, adult or child adverse childhood experiences, and the trauma-informed care stuff, people who have had those kinds of traumas, and then they're just expected to go to work. They don't know how to function when they're there, and they keep losing their jobs, and they keep being depressed. And I'm not making excuses. I really, truly am not. But there's an understanding of a certain part of the population. Not everybody that wants to go to work even knows how to go to work or how to stay employed if they could go to work. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you so much. And
You're
again,
welcome.
thanks for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Allard.
Hi, Miss Ruth. It's a pleasure to finally meet you.
Yes, you too.
So I guess I agree that you wanted to teach people how to fish, right? And some of them, they don't need to teach how to fish. They just need to do on-the-job training. So I think
Yes.
you guys decide that, right?
We have that too, yes.
So you said there was, because this ring, you said there were 40, how many people do you have right now that were looking? You said there was 40?
Oh, no, I was just talking about one particular pot of money that we had. We had 97 families enrolled, and out of that in November, middle of November to middle of January, which is the hardest time to find jobs for people, we were able to put 40, I think it was 42, I think I said 41, but I think it was 42 of those 97 families got an employment. And so what we're saying is, for us, net to ladder, catch them before they become homeless, and help them climb the career ladder. And so We want to get them a job. I don't care what kind of a job. We want to get them employed. We want to keep them from becoming homeless. Some kind of work, some kind of money. But that isn't going to make them financially self-sufficient. So we want to get them into training programs. We want to get them into OJTs, as on-the-job training, internships. We have a variety of ways to move people forward. And one of the problems is that almost all the money that, I write almost all the grants for 9-Star. So, and I do that between like 6 at night, 1 in the morning, because we have work to do in the day, right? But one of the problems is those are not all renewable. They're very rarely renewable for this population. We can get our work services program, which we serve about anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 clients a year. We can win that every year because we do such a great job in serving that population. But this other population are people who have fallen through the cracks. They are people who are not eligible for unemployment because maybe they made $5 too much, or maybe they are ineligible because they cheated the system and they're not eligible anymore, or, and so now they become vulnerable to being homeless. And when people get off of public assistance, we had, in the last 3 years, we've had over 3,000 of 9-Star's clients get off public assistance. But they are still vulnerable. And so our new Net to Ladder program is to try to keep them caught, keep them climbing the ladder so that they don't fall back into needing public assistance or even food stamps, or, it's an expensive process. And if you add housing to it, that's $1 trillion more. So as many dollars as you can give us to help people not only get a job, because that's not enough, but get them over their barriers and get them into training of one kind or another, we're going to have a population of people who give back to the community instead of needing to take from the community. I don't know
Chair,
if that's what you were looking for.
Yeah, Chair, can I just go? Okay, so it is.
Thank you.
Because what you're doing for me is saying, okay, so where do we spend the money for retraining versus another organization? Putting folks back into the community, I get it, I understand that, but are we spending too much money retraining with a larger group of individuals retraining instead of focusing on a core group, because you just sold me on yours, right?
Well,
so now that means, okay, well, 9-Star, I like.
Thank you.
Right? And then
right.
Where do we cut to say 9-Star is going the direction I like? Could we cut over here to continue with your program more so?
Well, I'm not going to tell you who to cut.
No, but we'll
Those
figure
are our
it out.
partners, right? So I'm not going to do that. But I am going to say that the more money that you can funnel into prevention, and even the people who do housing, they will tell you there is not enough money for housing in this community. There is not enough money to build all the housing we need, or the different kinds of housing. There's like 4 or 5 different kinds of housing we need, from temporary assistance to moving forward to mentally ill people who just need something forever and ever, and everything in between, individuals and families. But the idea is that if 9-Star's program, and honestly, I'm going to tell you, the first year and a half that we had this program going officially, we'd been doing it unofficially, just not even keeping track. But the first year we kept track, we had $53,500, and we took that money and we served just net stuff because we had no money for ladder, and we put 599 people to work out of 1,200, and there may have been more, but we didn't have any follow-up money, so we didn't even train them. Couldn't even track them. So I don't know how many, but what I know is, like I said, all the people in that housing council will tell you, the End Homelessness Council will tell you, prevent, and that is our focus. Sometimes there are people who have been homeless and need our services, but mostly our target population is helping those people who are falling through the cracks and are going to become homeless, and part of that whole statistic. And I want to say just one more thing, if I have a second. When somebody becomes afraid that they will become homeless, they have a fear that takes away their sound thinking, it takes away their love, their power. It totally takes fear. Every time we're afraid, we lose our power, correct? for maybe a split second, but sometimes for long term. And so fear is a bad thing. And once you get somebody even into temporary housing, it's dangerous because they're afraid to move forward and lose that temporary housing. They're afraid to move forward if they even move into the next level of it and they get a job. They're afraid that if they get a better job, that they're going to lose their housing again and they're going to be back where they were before. And this is safe. It's like kids coming home from college or, school and I don't want to go back to school because I'm safe here. Well, it's kind of like that. Fear does that to us. And so we're doing our very, very best to try to bring people into a place where they can get rid of that little bit of fear and not have the bigger fears that keep them immobilized for a much longer period of time. So.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity.
Welcome.
Hello, I'm Beth Nordland, Executive Director of the Anchorage Park Foundation, and it's been more than a year since I've seen you in person, and a while since I've testified, so hello. I am here today to answer your question, Mr. Weddleton. How can I work with other groups and organizations to make good things happen? The Anchorage Park Foundation has been contacted by the Roadmap to a Vital and Safe Anchorage group and the Anchorage Downtown Partnership and other partners that care about activating our parks downtown. So our goal here is to activate our parks and our trails to make safer spaces. And in the summer of 2020, with a lack of tourism and some shuttered businesses, we saw some grim activities in our parks downtown. So we want to be a partner in helping activate those spaces. We've put a bunch of requests to the legislature. We'll see if they'll get funded with the capital dollars that are associated with COVID relief. But I put 3 requests forward to this body in case they can get incorporated and working together. One is for $50,000 to be the partner with the Anchorage Downtown Partnership that helps build a structure for co-working, their co-working proposal that they have this summer. So as you talked about what can some partners do and other partners do differently, we think that the Downtown Partnership is a great partner for us because they do programming and they activate spaces and we can build things in parks. So we're interested in helping them build their co-working space for this summer, summer 2021, and we asked for $50,000 for that. We put in a request for $40,000 for bike racks because we think we'd like people to bike to the downtown and eat in the downtown and spend their money in the downtown and activate our spaces downtown. And then we also put money in for the cultural tourism and wayfinding request. We think they didn't ask for enough, and we think that we're the partner that can help them build it. So we asked for $500,000 from the legislature, and I just also put the same request forward to you, allowing that this is what we think can create a vital, resilient, and active downtown. Also, really like the permit holiday that the administration put forward.
Thanks. I do have a question from Ms. Zolotel.
Hi, it's nice to see you again. So I was having a little bit of trouble tracking do you have the spreadsheet that we have?
Yes, I do.
Do you have the line items that those coordinate with?
Well,
or are they just not on there?
They're not on there.
Okay.
I can tell you this. Mr. Constant put forward 34L.
Okay.
And that one is the one that's $300,000 for the Downtown Partnership. They need to program those spaces. And I would say that what they've asked for is not enough to program and build.
And so that was the 50,000 additional for the co-working, or the 500,000 for the wayfinding, both? I'm just trying to see where they coordinate, so.
I would say that all the requests are pretty much in 34L.
Okay.
And then also, number 20, I think, that one is the RVSA, but that's just for the consulting, not for building anything.
Okay. The follow-up question I have on the building side of things is you said for downtown. So I'm very interested in spaces outside of downtown.
Okay.
And so I'm interested in the idea of more bike racks in spaces outside of downtown so that we can activate more of our spaces throughout both the Greenbelt and the adjacent neighborhoods.
Agreed.
Is there a rule of thumb if we're looking at the cost or how to look at bike rack funding?
Well, I put forward a very bland, not artful request to Mr. Constant. He was probably like, oh, that's not very gorgeous. The bike racks are not that expensive, but I think installing them and doing all the work that's involved with installing them is another kettle of fish. I think it's maybe more than one governmental entity that you'd have to work with.
Okay.
They're not very expensive, the bike racks, the plain bike racks.
Yeah.
But you got to get them installed, and I think you have to work with traffic, different agents. It's not just the Parks Department, which is we're really good at working with the Parks Department. I don't know who to call it traffic, but I'll work on that.
Okay, gotcha. So that proposal didn't go out to everyone, just to Mr. Constant?
Yes, because it was for the downtown. But yes,
Okay.
they're not very expensive. The bike racks are not very expensive.
If
It's
you
just,
could circulate it
Sure,
to us all,
yeah.
that would be helpful. I guess give a little more context as well.
Yeah.
I appreciate it's downtown, but I'm always interested in looking at the scaling. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks. Mr. Constant?
Yeah, thanks. I didn't realize it just came to me. Most of the proposals went straight to the chair and right into the magic hopper. I'm not exactly sure the process. Just to be really clear though, that line 34L, half of the funds are intended to help the downtown partnership ensure that its capital program, its equipment and materials are up to the job of doing the work in the downtown. The other half is for a variety of efforts and then to attract additional funding to do many of the projects that were described here. And so that section right there is pretty limited in its scope and really to be determined by the partnership. The goal here was to provide them with a flexible set of funds to do what's kind of emerging demands of the moment downtown, but at the same time to help upgrade the actual capital, the equipment that they have so they can continue to do the work going forward. I do look forward to sharing the proposals for additional funding and seeing where that lands, because there is a little bit at the very end of the spreadsheet available.
I think the equipment that they need is to help them with maintenance that they do regularly. So not to build an amazing co-working space, which I think if we did have a co-working space that attracted different agencies to come downtown and work at Town Square Park for a day in a safe outdoor setting where it was beautiful and you could do brainstorming and, get back to work, I think it will attract people to our downtown spaces, and then we will eat there and have a latte, and we need to activate these spaces. Nothing good is happening in a place without great programs.
Thank you. Mr. Whittleton?
Thanks. So tell me more about this co-working space. I mean, I think about places like the boardroom as a co-working place, and there's plenty of private ones that we
Right.
shouldn't be competing against.
The boardroom is a partner, and we're taking whatever they say about what you need for a great co-working space, and we want to implement that. So I'm not an expert on co-working. We're working with the boardroom, which is of course part of the downtown partnership and part of all the RVSA and all those groups. So we want to take our best thinking And even the boardroom even has the software that they will provide so that people can sign up for the co-working spaces.
I think I'm missing something. Why don't they just go to the boardroom? I want a co-working space, I go to the boardroom. And you're going to do something different?
Yes, it's something different because we're going outside where it's safer and we're activating Town Square Park. We are spending time in a positive, creative, successful, artful way in our good public spaces. And right now, or absent of programmed time in these parks, we're not finding good behavior.
I get the outside part.
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
Yeah, John, just a note about the outdoor working space. It's really a creative project, a pop-up art installation that's functional and has an opportunity to bring and catalyze people to think about downtown differently and use it differently. And in fact, I am aware of a builder that you know pretty well because he's built a number of units in your district recently, who has been building these amazing, I don't know how to describe it exactly, proposed modular mobile office spaces, kind of like a tiny home but a tiny office, and providing people with a very interesting and creative way to contemplate how they work in this kind of new world that we're facing coming out of a pandemic, where the office became obsolete for a year, and it raised questions about what can we do differently and how. And so I struggled with the concept of the outdoor working space because I try to think, how could you do your work outdoors? But then I realized that people are actually building concepts to do this, and I'll talk to you more about it offline. I don't want to give their secret up to the world. But so from an activation perspective, it's a very interesting idea to chew on. It isn't in competition. It's like just a prototype of an experience. And there are some pretty amazing documents of these kinds of things happening in other jurisdictions.
Thank you.
It is very exciting, and I think, it's something that could be done on the cheap. It could be done with some card tables and some access to some Wi-Fi with GCI as a partner. But if we do it right, it will be really compelling and tell a whole different story about the meaning of the office in the outdoor environment in the year 2021. So we're interested in putting some money in the capital side of this and working with our partners that can help us program the spaces.
Thank you. I have one more, Ms. Zolotel.
Thank you. So this discussion raises for me the parking day activity that goes on downtown.
Yes.
But I'm much more interested in multiple types of activation than an expansion of co-working, even if it's for demonstration purposes. So, if we go down this route, I guess I would like to really be thinking about what are light, quick, cheap ways we can activate space with items that, because there is an infrastructure piece to this that can be reusable in other locations. So if it's successful in downtown, maybe there's a similar parking day in Midtown or on the east side or, in Girdwood or Eagle River, Chugiak, because I think that's the success of placemaking, is when it's something that's replicable and it still remains fairly light, quick, and cheap. So
yes, completely agree. Okay. And I think that a lot of our partners on Parking Day over the years are the same people we're talking to. These are the landscape architect, artist types that really crave thinking about how we can use our spaces differently. It's very
awesome.
Artistic.
Great. I'm glad we got to talk some more about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Can you do a motion to extend the meeting so other people could speak along with me?
Because
we're scheduled to 7. So
yeah, thanks. We're actually going to just keep going until we're done, so we're fine. So did you want to speak? Did you want to speak, Mr. Haberman?
Okay, but don't you have to do it because it's advertised at 7. That's what I'm concerned about.
All right, I'll go ahead and get you started then. Thank you. Welcome.
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I represent myself. I follow the public process. When the public process is done appropriately, the decision made by the governing body is more likely in the public interest. First of all, with what was left of the schedule, you only had 45 minutes left for the town hall portion. It's scheduled at 4:30 and ends at 7. So they needed to do a motion to continue, with all due respect. Yes, this is the fourth work session, but that is not exactly true, because the truth of the matter is, you laid on the table toward the end of the Wednesday meeting the proposal for funding and how you, the administration and members of the assembly, how you were looking to spend the money. And then you scheduled a town hall work session portion for Monday from 4:30 to 7, and then a public hearing Tuesday. That's fast-tracked. With all due respect, you did it also the same time as an election commission public canvass is dealing with a recount of 2 school board seats, and then you're putting the public hearing at the same time that you're dealing with tomorrow when you're dealing with the scenario with the certification of that recount. Cloud the picture, look who you have in this room. As I've said before on the previous work sessions, you need I've heard presentations at the work session where you selected certain people you wanted to hear and others you didn't have a chance unless they had the town hall portion. And I'm talking about the other work sessions. Where's the audit? You're seeing proposals by parties on these different work sessions, by parties who have received funding already dealing with COVID. But what have you done in looking in the financial situation of how the money has been spent? I'd like to point a news story in respect that there is an accusation which you're innocent until proven guilty of a particular hotel owner, and the feds are concerned about appropriate spending the money. And that should be an alarm bell. An alarm bell. They may be perfectly innocent, but what is factual here is the municipality of Anchorage, yourselves, administration, have failed to properly look at how the money is being spent. And you're fast-tracking the process where you have the proposal on a Wednesday night laid on the table toward the end, and you're having a public hearing when? Tomorrow night. With all due respect, I remind you, in COVID situation, and this is because of COVID that this money is coming from the Fed. If COVID wasn't here, we wouldn't see that money coming to Anchorage and other communities around the state. And the fact is that in times of COVID, there's even more reason to provide a reasonable opportunity the public heard, not less. And that is what's been going on with 6 seconds to spare. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Welcome.
Chair,
Thank you.
Pardon me, Mr. Chair.
Sure, Mr. Constant.
Just before we move on, I want to make 2 notes for the record that the individual with the hotel did not receive funding from the municipality, but in fact did from a federal program. So we had no part in that. And I would offer to anyone concerned that tonight wasn't a good enough opportunity to speak on this item, we have a public hearing tomorrow, and you're welcome to come back for another conversation with us.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Debbie Rinke, and I am with the Chugach-Eagle River Chamber of Commerce. And I'm here tonight just to, one, say thank you to all of you for awarding us the funding for last year. It helped us. It was used for payroll. The chamber would probably not be open right now if we did not have that funding. So we are very, very thankful for that. We also proposed the new, it's number 35, I think, on your list. And most of that money is pass-through money to our local Chugach-Eagle River community businesses. So I would really, really ask that you not take that from us because our community needs it. But I do think that Eagle River, Chugach, the Elks, the Lions, all those places need funding. So I just want to ask that you maybe not spread it from Eagle River, but maybe look at it at a different way. And that's all I have.
Thanks. So it looked like the system just went down. So if anyone wants to get in the queue, okay. Go ahead, Mr. Weddleton, and then I see Ms. Kennedy.
I don't know what you said to break our computers.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So well, I'm confused then. So I think, let's see, it was, 35. Because it said, and these are brief summaries for complicated things. Bear Paw, Platform using digital passes, events, stop here all year, Eagle River program, what's in the box, empowered digital business boxes delivered once a month to members. So when you say pass-through to other businesses, what does that mean?
So we will, with the Chugiak Eagle River all year long, we will, it's kind of convoluted program, but it's a lot like the Palmer Chamber did. They award people for spending money at a store, and then they can get a gift card to go to another store. So it kind of builds on each other and gets people out, and it gets them into all the different locations in our community.
Okay, so you're not like, here's $5,000 because of COVID, here's $5,000 because of, you're doing something to encourage buying local. And
Okay, I'll try to stop.
Do you want to restate your question, Mr. Whittle?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess tell me more about how's the gift card program work?
So if you go into a store like Pizza Man and you spend a certain amount of money, then you will be given another gift card to go to another store that is in Chugiak Eagle River.
So I would like bring my receipt to your office and say, hey, I spent $50 on pizza and I get a $5 gift card that's good at somewhere else.
Jitters or somewhere like that, yeah.
Okay, and you've been doing that?
We have done a couple exercises like that,
Okay.
yes.
Huh, is it working well? Must be.
It does work well.
Okay. Okay, good. That's what I need. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy?
Other questions of Ms. Rinke? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Would anyone else like to speak? All right, not seeing anyone. As Mr. Constant stated, we do have a public hearing on this item tomorrow, and then deliberation, possible amendments, and a possible vote. So looking forward to that. It will be our second meeting that we have planned tomorrow. So the first meeting we have starts at 6 and deals with the certification of the two school board seat recounts. And then once that meeting concludes, however long it takes, this second meeting will begin. So I guess before we end, Ms. Salatel?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Could we get the amendment form from either council or whatever format is desired to be used so that we can get those in as soon as possible?
Thanks. Ms. Camacho,
Thank you.
can you send those out? Great. So Ms. Camacho will be emailing those out to everyone. All right, not seeing anything else. Thanks, everyone, administration, the members, for attending this fourth work session in Third Town Hall. This work session in Town Hall is adjourned.